on this episode of Living Cosmos. It's not enough to go through the steps. You actually have to align and pay attention to what's happening in the room with you. And coherence is when you can feel that everybody is connected and dropped in and present and then aligned. They've bought in to the experience that's happening. That's the beginning of coherence for a group, and there are other aspects of it. Welcome to the Living Cosmos podcast. I'm your host, Matt Sturm. Our focus is on the questions, who am I, and what is my place in the cosmos? This exploration is in service to understanding our true nature on our path toward human realization. Today, we recognize that the universe has been on a journey of evolution from undifferentiated particles into life, consciousness, and even podcasts. You and I are vastly interwoven into this living, breathing cosmos. Our stories of healing, awakening, and self-actualization are each threads in the evolutionary tapestry of the cosmos. So, center in yourself and join me for this transmission. Hello and welcome to the Living Cosmos podcast. My name is Matt, and I am excited to welcome you today to this episode where we're going to be exploring a topic which is very relevant for me right now, which is facilitating group transformation. So my entry point into this topic is that I have been guiding and facilitating groups for the past decade through all sorts of different modalities, from sacred sexuality to breath work to medicine journeys to yoga. And I'm in the process of collaborating with some other colleagues on different ways to share out through training how to facilitate transformational experiences for groups. And this is specific for groups because they operate in some ways fundamentally differently than doing one-on-one transformational experiences like therapy or coaching or a one-on-one psychedelic assisted session. First off, group spaces are different because they are social. Humans are incredibly social animals. We interact with each other, we engage with each other in conscious and unconscious and somatic ways. And those ways create dynamics that the group undergoes that are emergent, which are not found in one-on-one transformational spaces. The other huge difference that's worth noting is in a one-on-one transformational experience, the person undergoing the journey has the full attention and singular focus of the person holding the space. And in most, basically all of the group experiences that I facilitate, there are more than one person for every facilitator or assistant. And so it's not possible to focus solely and specifically on each individual as they're undergoing the experience. And so there's a diffusion of attention and a different skill to hold the space of the group. And so coming back to the impetus for our topic today, which is transformational group experiences and how to facilitate them, independent of the modality, there is a common skill set that I am working on putting into words here so that I can transmit this to people for how the process works and how to show up as a facilitator and what is required of us today as facilitators that wasn't required 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but that we do need to come up to speed on now, which is outside of most of the curriculum for a specific modality. So as we get into this, you'll start to see what I mean. I want to start with the process of transformation for a group. It follows the same formula that humans have been using for most of our species, as far as we can tell, which is the process of initiation. And in the process of initiation, which I have written about and spoken about elsewhere, but worth restating, we enter into sacred space, which is distinct from ordinary or mundane time and space. And we have to cross a threshold into something special, something significant about this space. And time doesn't work the same here. The rules of reality are different. It's more of a magical realism and an animism than a concrete world. And so as a group, we need to transition from both physically but also mentally, from thinking about our days and what's happening and what we have to get ready for next, and planning or processing what just happened, like all of that normal human stuff that we do as we go about our days. The group and each person in the group needs to make that transition into presence, into focusing here and now with our full attention. And so the role of the facilitator or facilitators is to be the shepherd, the gatekeeper of that transition for the group. And often that looks like doing a little grounding meditation. When we do retreats, there is a physical movement to get to the space. We may call in the directions or say an opening prayer or a dedication. And all of these are technologies, really, they're tools to signal to the psyche that I'm transitioning into something different now. And when the individuals in the group don't make that transition, then they get stuck either in regular space and they pop out of the transformational experience, or they get stuck halfway in between in liminal, or the word is liminoid space, where it's warped and things get crunchy or sloppy or messy. People get stuck halfway in between, and that's no fun. The same, by the way, happens on the way out. It's the role of the facilitator to then transition everybody in the group back out so they're not stuck in the dreamland of initiation. So then what happens in the process of initiation is that each of the initiates, the people going through the experience, undergo a process of trial and surrender. Ultimately, it's surrender, so that the larger wisdom of life can move through them. Oftentimes, this involves an identity shift. The old me I let go of, and then I discover that there's a new me ready to be reborn in the space that was created. And there's a new reality waiting for me on the other side of that. Particularly in a group transformational experience, it's worth stressing that what happens in sacred space is not under the control of the people who are holding the space. And I'll come back to this point because it really is crucial. We create the conditions for the transformation, but it is not our job to transform people directly. Life takes care of that. And one of the places where facilitators can kind of get in the way of the process is by thinking that they need to do the transformation for the people who are receiving it. But so this process of transformation happens. And then there is a return and a transition back into the regular world, the ordinary world. And when we undergo this as a group, there is an experience for the participants, it's called communitas, of all being in this together. And not only that we're all in this together, but we are all sharing in this human experience and this experience of life together. So all types of social rank, normal power structures that we consciously or unconsciously play into socially, For the participants, those all get stripped away until we're just bare, regular, humble humans. And in that, we get to connect with each other on a level that we don't normally get to connect on in the outer world. And so it creates this beautiful bond of camaraderie. Communitas is the word that anthropologist Victor Turner gave to it. We bond. And going on retreats, whether it's a meditation retreat, for me, like a men's retreat or a medicine retreat, like all of these can be incredibly bonding experiences where I really feel connected to the other participants there. And that is communitas, and it's one of the outcomes of going through a group transformational experience. So, how do we do this as facilitators? And what is important today for us to have in our awareness, but also our embodiment? What do we need to bring as a facilitator into shepherding a group transformational experience? The most important aspect for me is the concept of coherence. So, coherence is similar to synergy or harmony, like everything is working together. There is a whole, as opposed to incoherence, where things are falling apart, there's noise or chaos. It's not to say that chaos isn't part of a coherence experience. It very much can be. But the difference is this. In a coherent group field, everybody in the group is sharing an understanding and an intention about what's happening. We don't need to know what the transformation will be, but we do need to know that we are going into a transformational experience and how and for how long and what the boundaries and the rules of that space are. And so we're all sharing in this same resonance of this is what's happening. And it's the role of the facilitator to create coherence. Now, you could have a practice of, giving people an email ahead of time to explain what's happening, and you may have your words for doing your little grounding meditation. It's not enough to go through the steps. You actually have to align and pay attention to what's happening in the room with you. And coherence is when you can feel that everybody is connected and dropped in and present and then aligned. They've bought in to the experience that's happening. That's the beginning of coherence for a group, and there are other aspects of it. When we have a coherent field, then the process is supported to unfold. The image that I like to offer for this is how I think about it, because I'm a visual person. If you imagine a circle with a point in the center, the astrological glyph for the sun. So everybody in the experience, whether we're physically in a circle or not, we're the participants and the facilitators, we are all in this together. It means we're in a circle. We're all in a relational field that is equal. We're all going through this thing together. Even though the facilitators properly are not undergoing transformation, their role is to be a ritual guide. But we all sit in a circle together, and there is a certain equality that comes with that. And so when everybody takes their place in the circle, that's the beginning of the container. And then when we all focus our attention towards the center, that point in the center of the circle, then we have coherence. Then we are all focused and harmonized and synergizing together. We're all working together for whatever the modality is that's unfolding. Then what happens is, as we undergo the process of initiation, we have entered the circle, we have cast the circle, so to speak, and now we are entering into it, and we're all on a journey to the center. The facilitator may be a focalizer for what's happening. Like if you think about a yoga teacher in a yoga class, The instructor is giving the instructions every step of the way, and so the voice of the instructor is the focus. But the center is something different symbolically. So the role of the facilitator is to focus the attention and keep the attention focused. But then where we all go is to the center of the mandala, which is the center of our self. And the role of the process of initiation is to guide us into our own center. So now my imagination, if you're a visual person, I hope you can follow along with me. If you imagine, say, 6 people sitting around a circle. So there's a circle, and there's 6 points around the circumference of the circle, and there's 1 point in the center. That's the where we're all going. At a certain point, each of those 6 dots on the circumference becomes its own center with its own circle. And so now you've got 6 circles that each open up, and it starts to look like the diagram of the flower of life. And if you're not familiar with the flower of life, you can Google it, but it's a geometric shape. And to me, it is the shape that illustrates space giving birth to matter and form in all of creation. It is the 0-point field. It is Vesica Pisces upon Vesica Pisces. All these, this zone of creation opens up from space. So each person on the big circle becomes their own center, and then their own circle opens up, and then we create this field throughout the whole group. And the field amplifies. So one person having one experience will have a certain amount of energy and gravitas that it carries with it. 2 people going through an experience will not be 1 + 1 = 2. It's like 1 + 1 = 3. The energy of the 2 people amplify each other in a group. And when the group is 100 people, it's much, much more than that. And so this is another one of those dynamics which is specific to facilitating group transformation, is that we open a field, and the field is co-resonant. So what do I mean by co-resonant? Humans have these, neurologically, we have mirror neurons. We mirror each other, and we follow along with each other. So if one person starts laughing, other people in the group are likely to start laughing, even if they don't think that whatever the first person is laughing at is funny. We're just mirroring, we're mimicking what's happening, and that can spread like a contagion through the group. Co-regulation, we have a limbic system as mammals to feel each other, to feel how it is for the other person or the other people that we're in contact with. And our nervous systems naturally pick this up. So if somebody's scared, we'll feel that. If somebody's dysregulated, we'll feel that. If somebody is regulated, we'll slow down with them. And our body will regulate with them, and we'll actually regulate together. So co-regulation. Understanding this process is part of it, but embodying, so by that I mean understanding how limbic co-regulation works is part of it, but embodying that is more important as a facilitator. So if we go back to the yoga teacher who's giving the instructions to the class, if that yoga teacher is distracted or upset, their voice is going to transmit, distracted or upset, their state to everybody in the class. And so we say that the focalizer, the person who's facilitating this, is the dominant nervous system in the room. I use the term dominant nervous system. The term dominant is kind of a loaded term these days. I use this in a neutral way. And there's a way to dominate a room utilizing the power of being the facilitator, which we would say is harmful or fraught. And then there are other aspects of domination, like being the dominant nervous system, which are morally neutral. Being the dominant nervous system just means it's the recognition that when I'm speaking, or when all of the attention of the group is on me, my nervous system state has an amplifier on it for the group. And so if I'm calm and relaxed, or if I'm energized and upregulating, or if I get scared or distracted, all of that is going to ripple into all of the other little antennae that the nervous systems of the participants are holding. So the state of the facilitator matters tremendously for how things go through this kind of wild ride into transformation. And this is where the inner work of the facilitator really comes on board. It's our job to create, I'm going to get technical here, vagal tone. So the vagus nerve is what's responsible for whether we're resting and relaxing or we go into fight or flight. Vagal tone means we have more capacity to stay down regulated. And there are all sorts of embodiment practices like yoga, like breath work, like Tai Chi that can help with creating more resilience to stay relaxed under increasing levels of stress. So the embodiment of the facilitator carries the group to a certain extent. And it may not carry every individual in the group, but it sets the tone, it sets the overriding feel of what's happening in the space. So you may learn a bunch of modality-specific techniques in whatever training you go through, but what they may not teach you is how to relax and transmit that. Or for some, like when I'm guiding breath work, I'm energizing the room with my voice. How to use my voice to command the energy of the room. Another important point on the topic of being the dominant nervous system. When somebody gets triggered or upset or somehow pops out of the container in a group experience, and then they share about their trigger, they are grabbing the microphone for the room, and then they're amplifying their emotional and nervous system state. And that can ripple out and it can completely break the container of a group experience. So there's a skill set here as a facilitator to acknowledge whatever trigger and whatever underlying needs are there for the person who gets triggered, but simultaneously to not take on and mirror the stress that that person is transmitting and communicating through their voice or through their affect. When the facilitator is able to stay down-regulated, the sense of this is okay, there's nothing wrong here, and we're going to do whatever we need to do to address your situation, then everybody else in the group will feel that and respond to that in kind. When some person is triggered and they're upset and the facilitator gets upset in turn, we now have two amplifying voices putting dysregulation into the space. And this starts to ripple and amplify, and it disrupts the coherence of the group. There is so much more that I could say on the topic of coherence and group facilitation. But for the sake of this episode, I'm going to move on to some other topics which I also have a lot of passion about. So in the transformational experience, in that journey of initiation, symbolically, it oftentimes is pictured either as a death or a dismemberment or a total destruction, collapse, explosion, like stuff goes boom, right? So the skill set that I want to speak to now is understanding the difference between someone going into a trauma response and someone undergoing a death and rebirth process. And oftentimes they look very, very similar. Both of them can be scary. Both of them can be very disorienting. Both of them may feel to the participant like this is not okay. One of them, the process of death and rebirth, is completely okay. It's the reason why we're here. The other one, being traumatized or re-traumatized, is, I don't want to say not okay, but it's causing harm for the person who's having that experience. And whatever transformation might be trying to happen there, if the person is checked out of their body, if they're shut down or they're frozen or dissociated into the light realms, they're not going to receive the transformation. They're actually going to miss it. They won't be able to integrate the shift and the change that is trying to happen. And instead, we're going to have to go back and piece this person back together, so to speak. So there are trainings out there and all sorts of tools to understand what does a trauma response look like. And different modalities will have a different range of what's possible. In a yoga class, a 75-minute yoga class, it's unlikely that someone is going to go into a major dissociated trauma. However, they may have body, like somatic trauma that releases in the class. Now, on the other hand, in an ayahuasca circle, I would say it's not uncommon for someone to have a trauma response open up in a space. And obviously, it depends on which circle and what you're doing, but it's much more in the realm of possibility. So it's our job as facilitators to understand how our bodies and our psyches function and to do our best to keep people within their window of tolerance. So the window of tolerance is a term from the trauma field. Basically, if you could imagine, there's an upper band and a lower band of stimulation, and we have a certain capacity to stay within those bands, internal intensity. That's our window of tolerance. We can tolerate this. Above that or below that, we check out. We can't hang anymore. And so the goal is to stay within the window of tolerance. And even, I'm going to add here that it shouldn't be the goal for everybody to stay perfectly within the window of tolerance 100% of the time. That would be great. And when we stretch outside of our window of tolerance, there's another capacity there, which is resilience. It's to build awareness of, oh, I'm getting flooded. Oh, I'm checked out. I can't feel my body anymore. To recognize when I'm outside of that zone or when a participant seems to be outside of that zone, and then to help us come back in. It's actually okay to go out of the zone and then come back in. What is not okay is to be ejected from the window of tolerance and get stuck out there. And, I remember a while back I had a client and I was talking to her about this sacred sexuality weekend retreat that she was in. And in the closing circle, people got triggered, a facilitator got triggered with a participant, and the people stormed out of the room, and the closing circle never closed. And it was a very disruptive experience. And I was talking, it was a week later, I was having a therapy session. I was the therapist for my client. And we were talking through what happened. And she was still dysregulated from that experience. And I asked her, did you ever close the retreat experience? And she thought about it. She was like, yeah. And then we thought about it. And I was like, how and when? And we went into it a little bit deeper. And she realized that actually, no, that part of her was still there waiting for the closing circle to finalize so that she could move on and start integrating her experience. Because the closing circle broke, she got stuck. And so in the session together, we said, okay, let's imagine that we're there and let's close this circle now. Let's ground it in and call all the parts home. And so that is an example of what we would hope would not be happening for the participants in the facilitation that we're guiding, where they get stuck in some type of frozen or traumatic, state. and then they can't move on with their lives, or they're dysregulated moving forward, and we're actually not contributing to their growth and their well-being. We're actually creating more labor for them to have to process through this thing that didn't go well. So I categorize all of this under being trauma aware, and I would also say being vagal embodied. And I haven't read that term anywhere else. I've never said that term before, but I'm going to say it here. Having an amount of embodiment for how the trauma response system works that I can, first of all, stay embodied myself as a facilitator. And then secondly, to be able to feel, to have, again, through limbic resonance, to feel how it is for this other person and get a sense of, are they just having a powerful experience, or are they checked out and gone too far? And do I need to support them to come back into presence? And presence and the capacity to be in the body in real time is what I track most. Okay, so that's my spiel on trauma. This is another one of those pieces which it's nuanced to learn about, but it's incredibly important, particularly as we step into facilitating larger or more powerful spaces than the potential that people pop off raises. The next piece that I want to speak to in terms of facilitating transformational spaces is power dynamics, social power. So this is the one in particular that has been shifting and growing for the better, I would say overall, quite a bit in recent times. So we each have a social position that includes our race, our sex, our class, our able-bodiedness, all of these social identity categories that are given to us at birth by society. And whether we acknowledge it or not, it is at play in a social space. It's always there. The question is, what do we do with it? And so the first thing is to make it conscious, to bring it into awareness that there is power, multiple levels of power dynamics that are happening in a group facilitated space. And in particular, the person who is in the facilitator's seat is holding a position of power vis-a-vis all of the participants in the space. The facilitator calls many of the shots. They guide the thing. They are the dominant nervous system. And because they're in that spot, they are prone to projections. We would say transference and countertransference, where because I'm the person sitting here, I might say something completely separate. Like if I'm teaching a yoga class, I might say, oh, and by the way, don't eat broccoli anymore. I might give some like diet advice because broccoli is bad for you for this reason, right? Some completely random comment. Because I'm in that seat of power, it carries an extra weight than if I'm just like hanging out with the friends and I say, oh, by the way, don't eat broccoli anymore, right? It's different. And so imagine instead of saying don't eat broccoli anymore, I'm saying to a participant, you should break up with your spouse. I'm in the seat of power where I carry an authority, which is larger than it would be in other social contexts. And so we need to acknowledge that. And there's an add-on effect, and I'm particularly aware of this because of if you make a list of the socially dominant of up power positions, I have most of those. So I'm white, I'm male, cisgendered. I pass as heterosexual, even though I identify as queer. So I kind of collect the positive attributes of being heterosexual. English speaking, American born, upper middle class, like all of these things contribute to myself holding privilege and others assigning that privilege to me. It's a co-created phenomenon because it's part of our culture. It's social. So if I have all of those things and I'm sitting in the position of authority vis-a-vis the group, then there's even more power that is my responsibility to understand how to work with. And so, in certain contexts, I speak to my social position. I just say, hey, these are the social positions that I hold. Because of this position, I have a certain viewpoint and I'm blind. I have blind spots to other perspectives. And that's just part of the human experience of being a social creature. But I'm doing my best to understand these blind spots and to understand how to hold this power in a good way. So now I want to return to the process of initiation. The participants need to go through this surrendering experience in order for the transformation to take place. Sometimes, and I've been in spaces like this, the facilitator or facilitators will use bullying or humiliation or imposition to get the participants into a state of subservience or submission. And the thing about that is that in terms of going through the process of transformation, it does the job because the process cares about the psychic state of the person going through the experience. However, by using the position of power to kind of coerce or cajole the participants into a state of submission, there are all sorts of other ramifications, like feeling abused or feeling gaslit, that participants go through, and feeling grandiosity that facilitators go through, which are totally undesirable and often harmful. And so the role of the facilitator is to create the conditions where the participants can surrender into the experience. It is not the role of the facilitator to get the participants to surrender. That is not actually the definition of surrender or how it works. And it's not the role of the facilitator to have the participants surrender to the will of the facilitator. And this is an important, crucial, I would say today, nuance with how power is wielded. And the understanding that the greater forces at play are what do the transformation can allow me as a facilitator to relax a little bit. I'm there to tend to the coherent field. And then beyond that, I can trust that each person is going to get exactly what they're supposed to get. They're going to get what they're ready for. And it doesn't mean that I can't be penetrative with my energy in certain contexts, that I can't get in there with someone into their process with them. But the nuance is when I'm getting in there to this person's process with them, it's not with my agenda, and it's not in order to enact or maintain my power over this person. The purpose of getting in there with someone, being penetrative with our facilitation, is to create the possibility that this person may not see or be aware of otherwise, for them to go more deeply into their own experience. And it's in service to the experience unfolding. I will say that there is another aspect of responsibility of the seat of power of the facilitator, which is if someone is being disruptive to the group transformation process that's trying to unfold, it's the role of the facilitator to maintain the safety of the space on behalf of everybody who is in this surrendered, vulnerable position, up to and including removing one of the members if they cannot follow what's happening or if they're not able to remove them from the space. That is part of being the gatekeeper. And that, I would say, it's a nuanced thing of when do you enforce the space and when do you give more room to the person who's having the experience, which is potentially disruptive to the group. But power gets exercised there, whether you do something that's an exercise of power or you don't do something that's also an exercise of power. And the final point I want to make on the topic of power is our responsibility to help people come back and integrate. If there is one thing that I wish we were focusing more of in the transformational spaces writ large field, it would be integration. We have all of these incredibly powerful tools to open people up. And we like to go for the highs. It's satisfying as a facilitator to see my participants having a big experience. Participants want to have a big experience, and that's fine. That's great. But the question is, what is this in service to? Are we just collecting a series of peak experiences that we can put on a trophy case somewhere or talk about with our friends? Or are we doing this in service to the evolution of consciousness and the well-being of everybody who steps into our space? And if it's the latter, then integration is really where the rubber meets the road. We have the transformational experience. We get a glimpse into a larger reality and a more empowered sense of ourselves. But if we go home and we slip back into who we were before we came to that experience, then nothing changes. Integration is how we take that big experience and reorganize our internal and external landscapes to match the empowered experience that we had in the center of the transformation, in the initiation. And so this is work. One of my favorite questions is, based on the experience you just had, what homework would you assign for yourself? But integration is also not leaving people disoriented, stuck, stranded, alone, isolated. One of the challenges for groups is that we might go to a retreat and we meet some awesome people and we bond with them and we have this big, awakening experience or huge healing experience. And, oh my God, I'm a totally different person. And everybody in the group is like, yeah, you're a totally different person. And then I leave the retreat and I go back home to my regular life. And the family members or friends who knew me before the retreat still see like version A of Matt. They don't see version B. And so when they see me, they say, hi, version A of Matt. And I'm like, no, I'm version B of Matt now. I'm the new transformed version. And they're like, no, okay, hi, version A of Matt. And coworkers, same thing. And then the routines start to come in and our regular life starts to reassert itself. And then we slip back into the old version of ourselves. And I've been here, I've done this, but I've also seen this for other folks, is I slip back into version A. And then I start to wonder, was version B even really real? Did that happen? Or was that just some weird hallucination that I had, right? And so the role of the facilitator with regards to integration is to provide enough continuity for version B to integrate, to get woven back into the reality sphere of regular life for the participants. If you just say, okay, you're version B, you're healed, you're fixed, you're awakened, off you go, it turns out to not be enough. And so continuity is crucially important. The other piece around this is, which is my next, actually segueing into my next topic, is attachment theory. So I've spoken about limbic resonance already. I've spoken about how we know how it is for people around us through co-regulation, through mirror neurons, and all of that is in the field of attachment. It's how humans interact, and more specifically, how we bond, how we connect with each other, how we do relationships. So that's what I mean by attachment. In a group space, ideally, attachment is happening. Well, no matter what, attachment is happening, and ideally secure attachment is happening. So let's talk about this for a little bit, because in American and Western culture, we first understood attachment theory in the 1950s, and there's decades of academic and clinical research on this between infants and their primary caregivers, usually their mother. And then there's like a little while later, we started to see attachment playing out between romantic bonds for adults. So how we do relationships uses the same attachment styles that we pick up and largely inherit during our first years of life from our primary caregivers. All of this research is looking at one-on-one bonds between two individuals within the framework of Western nuclear family systems. However, this is a piece that I'm super passionate about and excited about. For most of human history, most people didn't live in a nuclear family. We were born into a tribal village. And in a tribal village, attachment is not a one-on-one bond. It's actually a relational web. From the day you are born until the day that you die, you are surrounded by people who know you and you know them. So attachment in this context is like a network, and it's the harmonizing of the network. And this is how humans are kind of hardwired. You know, the nuclear family is a phenomenon of the last 75 years or so. The tribal village goes back millennia. So we properly experience attachment in a communitas context. And it's one of the beautiful things that happens in group transformational experiences. However, when we go and we have the experience and then we leave and we never talk to those people again, we're missing the continuity of attachment. Attachment happens kind of slowly. Like, think about getting into a romantic relationship. Think about getting a puppy and bonding with the puppy. It's not like a one weekend thing, right? It takes time. It takes months. It takes years, and it gets stronger and deeper, and it evolves, and it goes through all these different phases. So the village is ever present when you live in a village. And as Westerners, you know, speaking for myself, I don't have that lived experience. So I actually don't even know what I'm missing. But I imagine that in the village, that web, that network of connection is ever present. I'm just in it. That's my reality. And so the attachment system of feeling connected, of feeling loved, of feeling accepted, of feeling valuable, all of that is just kind of there. It's baked into village life. And so this is like a growing edge, a new frontier, is to create secure attachment within the context of a community. And how we do this as Westerners in the year 2025 is being figured out, but it's a very important piece. And it's one of the opportunities that we have. And there's so much I could say, but the big piece that I want to share here is that when there is continuity, then the field of attachment has the opportunity to become secure and to deepen. So having some understanding of attachment, I would say, not that it's crucial, like you can't facilitate a group space, but it's incredibly beneficial. In a group space where people are disconnected, where people don't feel safe, then that hampers vulnerability. And vulnerability is one of those ways that we surrender. So secure attachment in a group field means I get to be who I am, authentic. I get to share who I am, vulnerable. And I get to witness and receive other people as they are too. And the container is supposed to support that happen. In addition, secure attachment in a group field means that each participant in the group has a level of empowerment and capacity to take care of themselves and self-regulate so that the whole group doesn't have to stop. It's okay if it does, but ideally we're building our resilience. We're strengthening these muscles. We're building our capacity so that when we're going through the transformational experience and we hit those rough patches or that chaos shows up, each person is able to kind of self-regulate, know that they're going to make it through that, know that they're going to be okay, ask for help if they get into the danger zone or outside the window of tolerance. And then we have a resilient field. We have a securely attached group system so that we're all in this together and we're all holding ourselves first and foremost, and then able to hold each other kind of as a web, as a net, as we go through this experience of transformation, which can be disorienting. So those are some of the pieces that I think about with regards to attachment. Okay, the final piece, the final topic that I want to speak to here, I'm going to call this holding the seat of the facilitator. And what I mean by that is what it's like to sit as a facilitator through the transformational group transformational experience. The way that I understand this, and I have a pretty strong opinion on this, is that it's not the role of the facilitator to undergo the transformation, the same transformation, together with everybody who is a participant. It's not your role. Your role is to be a ritual elder and to maintain the sacred space, the coherent field. So that being said, what is it like to sit as a facilitator? What should we aspire to? And I definitely, on my journey through learning how to facilitate and hold space, went through phases of, I'm going to say martyrdom, of putting the experience of everybody else in the room ahead of my own, of giving myself away so that everybody else could successfully have the experience. And at the beginning, that's maybe developmentally appropriate. I really want to pay attention to what's happening in the room and ensure that the space is, being facilitated the way that I would like it to, right? But then there's like the next step is to include more of myself, to get to be vulnerable, to be quirky or weird or humorous with the group, to not take it so seriously and not take myself so seriously. And when I relax and start joking around, like everybody else relaxes a little bit too. And so there's a time and a place for that. And to know when I can let in more of my personality to the space. But in addition, facilitating a transformational space carries its own initiation. It just looks different. It's the initiation of the elder. And the role of the elder is to be a steward and a shepherd, meaning you're watching over the flock and you're mediating between these huge archetypal forces that we're opening up and these vulnerable humans that are here. And to get to step into that role is its own initiation. And every time I go through, guiding a group in a modality, and it's a powerful initiation, I get my own merit badge. I get my own initiation by going through that. And so there is something for me in it. And one place that I see facilitators get stuck is when they just go through, they've done it so many times that they're just going through the steps. And they've got a great process and they've got it dialed in and they know how to say all the things, but they're not invested in their own personal growth. They're not including themselves in the transformational process that's happening. And so there's this dance there's this dynamic tension between, as a facilitator, staying enough on my growth edge so that there is always something new happening for me as I'm going through whatever it is I'm facilitating, in dynamic tension with coming into mastery and proficiency in this modality, in this field, right? So I want to be able to hold the space well, and I want to be constantly innovating and trying new things so that I'm stretching myself a little bit. And in that stretching myself, I stay lively, I stay on my toes, and I'm growing and I'm receiving my own transformation, but from a different place than everybody else who's a participant. Okay, so this is the amount of information that I have time for today. It's really the tip of the iceberg. I could go into consent and eros and touch. There's so much more to say about projection and transference and countertransference. There's endless details. I love this stuff, clearly. But I think that's a good start for today of what I would wish that we would begin to standardize more of in terms of, and what I think is really being called of us as facilitators. And on that note, I'll share that in 2026, I am looking to be a leader for 2 different facilitator trainings. One is targeted at medicine guides to do retreats and group journeys. And that project is called Unity Bridge, together with my dear brother Dave. And the other project that I'm working on is a facilitator training in collaboration with Soul Play Festival. And there will be more information on both of these coming out. But as I've been digging into these topics, I wanted to just start to share back out. And so if this is resonating with you and interested, reach out to me. mattsturm.com is the easiest place to find all the things in my world. And I want to close with this thought. I have been deeply influenced in this work and the material that I'm sharing from the writings of Robert Moore, and also some of the lectures that he recorded when he was alive. In his study of the process of initiation, he came to the conclusion that accessing sacred space is a universal human need. That it is part of, like the caterpillar enters the cocoon to become a butterfly. On the symbolic level, humans need to, at various stages in their lives, again and again, enter a cocoon, dissolve into goo, and then become a human butterfly. That sacred space is a need. And when we're not able to find sacred space, then we turn to addiction and destructive strategies, and we get stuck in fundamentally immature expressions of humanity. So that is kind of the big picture. Both of the opportunity that we have as facilitators is to offer sacred space, and our responsibility as people who speak this language and understand what it is that we're doing here on behalf of our species and on behalf of our planet. And it is no small calling to step into the role of being a facilitator for a group transformation. So really, it's thank you for listening, and if you do this work, for doing the work that you do. And may all of this be in service to developing the collective conversation around how to be good stewards for the transformation that we so desperately need at this time. Yeah, amen to that. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us today for the Living Cosmos podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review and a rating on whatever podcast platform you use to access it. If you'd like to go deeper, I'd encourage you to head over to livingcosmos.com, where I have a whole host of free videos and resources, as well as whatever courses I'm offering today. This podcast is made possible by subscribers to my Patreon, Living Cosmos. You can head over there to become a member to access bonus material and content. Thanks again, and aloha.